She woke each morning before the sun, always before him. The kettle would hiss, the toast would brown, and the silence would stretch between the clink of plates. They didn't fight. They simply existed side by side, two quiet figures navigating the same routine, year after year. To anyone looking in, theirs was a peaceful life. But peace, she had come to learn, was often just the absence of noise, not the presence of joy. Her name didn't matter. It hadn't for some time. To her husband, she was love, in the way people say it when they're tired. He was kind, never cruel, and that, she believed, was the greatest trap of all. Because kindness made it harder to explain the emptiness. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't anyone's. She had once painted oils and watercolors, anything that stained her hands and made her feel real. But the canvases now lay stacked in the attic, untouched. Instead, her days were filled with lists, groceries, bills, quiet errands. She filled her time with tasks, her heart with silence. Beyond the town, there was a hillside she visited. It wasn't special to anyone else, just a patch of wild grass and sky, but it had become her sanctuary. And always, in her mind, there was the goat. Small, white, with curious eyes. It wandered freely, grazing where it pleased, untethered and alone. She didn't know why the image comforted her, but it did. The goat had no clock, no ring, no name. One Tuesday morning, he arrived. A new neighbor. His presence was announced not by sound, but by stillness, how the birds seemed to pause when he passed, how even the wind shifted around him. He was tall, with a careless elegance and a voice that held quiet gravity. He smiled at her from across the fence as she watered the garden. It was a small moment, but something flickered, like dust catching sunlight. Their first conversation was nothing. The weather. The flowers. The way the bakery's bread had lost its flavor lately. But something unspoken lingered beneath each word. She didn't feel seen, she felt noticed. And for someone who had felt invisible for so long, that was enough to stir something reckless. That night, she dreamed of the hillside. The goat stood at the edge of the grass, staring at her. This time, it stepped closer. It didn't speak. It didn't have to. I in the kitchen the next morning, she made breakfast like always. He sat across from her, reading the news aloud between bites. She nodded, smiled in the right places. But part of her was still on the hill. Still watching the goat. Still wondering why it had chosen to come near. By the time the plates were cleared, the day already felt different, and though nothing had happened yet, nothing at all, something had begun. Their paths began to cross with subtle consistency. At first, it seemed like coincidence. At the corner shop, near the mailboxes, once at the town library where she hadn't been in months. Each meeting was brief, wrapped in pleasantries, but there was an unspoken current beneath the words. It wasn't flirtation, not yet. It was awareness. A mutual recognition of something stirring. He introduced himself one morning as they reached for the same basket of apples. Elias, he said, voice smooth but quiet, as if afraid to disturb the morning air. She told him her name, surprised at how easily it left her lips. For the first time in years, she felt the shape of it. After that, they began sharing small moments. A slow walk along the riverside path. Coffee on a bench beneath the turning leaves. Their conversations were light, books, music, the strangeness of small-town life, but their eyes said more. She found herself laughing again, not because something was funny, but because it felt good to be heard. Her husband didn't notice. He asked about her day with habitual politeness, kissed her forehead out of memory more than desire. She answered him truthfully, mostly. She had seen Elias again. They had talked. That was all, but deep inside, something was shifting. She began to anticipate those encounters, choosing her outfits with more care, brushing her lips with color again. Her reflection in the mirror no longer looked like a stranger. There was warmth behind her eyes. The faintest glow. Elias never pushed, never crossed a line. But there were moments, lingering glances, fingers brushing accidentally, a silence that felt heavier than any conversation. Once, she saw his jaw tighten when she mentioned her husband. Once, he touched her wrist while laughing, and neither of them pulled away. At night, the dreams returned. The goat was closer now, walking beside her as she climbed the hill. Its eyes were calm, knowing. She felt no fear. Only a sense of inevitability. One afternoon, caught in an unexpected rain, they ducked under a tree. Her hair clung to her neck, his shirt damp against his skin. She looked at him then, truly looked, and he looked back as though memorizing her. Time slowed. She could hear the soft patter of rain, the thunder of her own pulse. His hand reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Their faces drew close. She didn't stop him. The kiss was brief, barely more than breath. But it was enough. The line had been crossed, not with lips, but with intention. That night, she stood by her window long after the house went still. The world outside shimmered with rain. In her mind, the goat stood at the hilltop, watching her with quiet judgment. She should have felt shame. Instead, she felt awake. The house felt colder with her husband away. He had left for a 2-day work trip, routine, uneventful, and kissed her goodbye without suspicion. She stood in the doorway after the car pulled out, unsure whether she felt relieved or abandoned. That evening, the silence pressed in. She turned on the radio, then off again. Cooked too much food, then pushed most of it aside. Her thoughts drifted, uninvited, unstoppable, to Elias. When the knock came, she didn't hesitate. She had texted him earlier, nothing suggestive, just, "If you're free tonight, I'm around." He stood on her porch with a bottle of wine and that familiar half-smile. Neither of them said much as she let him in. The door closed with a click that sounded final. They ate in the dim light of the dining room, their conversation careful at first. Safe topics, familiar rhythms. But the pauses grew heavier, the silences deeper. When he reached for her hand across the table, she didn't pull back. The bedroom wasn't lit by candles or music. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet, human, real. Their clothes fell away slowly, like layers of hesitation. He kissed her with a kind of reverence, as if afraid she might vanish. Her skin remembered what it meant to be touched with purpose. Afterward, they lay tangled in stillness. She didn't speak. Neither did he. She awoke before dawn, heart pounding, sheets twisted around her. Elias was still asleep beside her, peaceful and bare. She rose quietly, wrapped in a robe, and went to the kitchen. The kettle hissed like it always did. But the sound felt sharper now, cutting through something inside her. She stared at the window, into the darkness beyond. The hill, though far from view, loomed in her mind. The goat stood there again, only now, it teetered near the cliff's edge, wind rippling its fur. Its eyes met hers, not with judgment, but with sorrow. Something in her chest twisted. When Elias emerged, she didn't smile. He came behind her, touched her waist. She flinched, not from him, but from herself. "Should go," he said softly, and she nodded. Later that day, her husband returned. He held a bouquet, white lilies, her favorite, and a small smile. "I missed you," he said, and for a moment, the word struck her like a blow. He looked tired, older somehow. But his eyes searched hers with a tenderness that felt almost unbearable. Guilt didn't announce itself. It seeped in slowly, like water under a door. Every look he gave her, every casual touch, felt like a reminder of what she'd broken. The weight of it pressed against her ribcage. "Elias texted that night, thinking of you." She didn't respond. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The goat was gone now, disappeared from the hillside of her mind. She couldn't decide if that made her free or completely lost. Weeks passed like drifting smoke, thick, ungraspable. She moved through her days with practiced precision: groceries, laundry, dinner on the table by 6. But everything felt thinner, like the skin over something festering beneath. Her husband tried, in his own quiet way. He brought home flowers again. He suggested weekend plans they used to enjoy. He even pulled her into a slow dance in the living room one evening, laughing nervously when he stepped on her foot. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. His touch no longer filled her. It only reminded her of what she had taken for granted, and what she had risked. Then, one morning, it happened that he found her phone. Not in a dramatic search or heated suspicion, just a glance at a notification that flashed too long. A message from Elias: "I missed the way you looked at me." She heard the silence before she saw his face. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply handed her the phone, then sat at the edge of the bed, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. She confessed, not because she had to, but because she couldn't keep holding the weight alone. The words came slowly, like stones pulled from her throat. She told him the truth, about the emptiness, about Elias, about how it wasn't love, just something she needed to feel alive again. That he listened. That hurt more than any screaming would have. Later, he packed a bag. No final words, no slammed doors. Just a look, a mixture of grief, fatigue, and something close to acceptance. When the door closed behind him, the house didn't echo. It sighed. Elias reached out again. Called twice. Texted. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. What existed between them had never belonged in the real world. It had lived in the space between loneliness and illusion, and that space had collapsed. She returned to the hillside one morning as autumn crept in. The grass had grown taller, more wild. Wind swept through her hair as she scanned the horizon. No goat. No symbol. No silent companion. For the first time, she didn't look for it. Instead, she sat cross-legged in the field, palms open to the sky. The quiet no longer frightened her. It simply was. She thought of her husband, of the way he had once held her when she cried after losing a painting competition. She thought of Elias, of what he had offered, a mirror, not a future. And she thought of herself, not as the girl in a story, but as someone still writing 1.by the time she stood to leave. The sun had broken through the clouds. She walked back barefoot, feeling each blade of grass, each pebble underfoot. There was no clarity, no neat conclusion, only this: the ground beneath her felt real again, and that, for now, was enough.